The Geopolitics and Empire podcast is joined by Moscow-based American journalist Robert Bridge. He's also the author of Midnight in the American Empire. We'll be having a chat on the American Empire, the election, the Civil War scenario, COVID, cancel culture, the post-American world, and what it's like for both of us being expatriates. As they say in Russia, как дела, Robert?
Все хорошо, спасибо большое.
All right.
A little bit cold here.
I can imagine. Perhaps we could start by, I was thinking to discuss our experiences as both as Americans and as expatriates, which I think is of interest to some listeners. There's always people who are thinking of leaving the U.S. You left the U.S. 25 years ago and have been in Russia for a quarter of a century, and you recently became a Russian citizen. I left the U.S. something like 15 years ago. I wanted to see the world and experience different cultures. I had also gotten tired of some of the negative aspects of American culture, which tend to be marked by, a lewd type of behavior, excessive drinking, sexual immorality, and the focus on unintellectual pursuits such as, sports and entertainment. And, I sought more conservative culture, which I found in Central Asia and the Americas. And people have told me, you don't know your own culture until you step outside of it and examine it from without. And furthermore, a shocking moment for me was when I discovered that America was an empire, as silly as that sounds, because most Americans grow up thinking they live in just another nation state. And for me, discovering the function of the Federal Reserve, the budding surveillance police state, that we are citizens of an empire was quite, shocking. And I know the subject of 9/11 is touchy, but I personally believe, that forces within our own government carried that out, and that kind of really shook me. And so I saw America on permanent decline, especially economically, and I kind of envisioned it descending into some kind of totalitarian state. And I thought I could get out of harm's way, but I never envisioned that, this tyranny would go global, as we've seen with the COVID situation. So anyways, I became a dual citizen, a Mexican. You became a Russian. I still love the traditional idea of America, its ideals, its people, Americana, let's say. I consider myself an American constitutional patriot. And I would like to preempt anyone who dares to criticize me, as they have in the past, for being unpatriotic by fleeing, because the fact that I run this podcast that criticizes the empire is enough to get me into trouble, thanks to things like what Obama signed in, the NDAA, which, can now arrest Americans and put them away forever without any pretext or judge or evidence. So, I think that's far more than any of my critics can say who live in the U.S. but who don't speak up apart from making comments on internet forums anonymously. So, Robert, perhaps take us through a little bit of your experience of becoming an expatriate, a Russian citizen, and your view on America and the American empire.
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. Great pleasure. Like as you mentioned, a quarter of a century ago, which makes it seem much longer than 25 years ago. I decided to. It was actually a fluke. I can't say that I had any. It was through meeting one individual who suggested at that particular time in my life, and at that particular time in my life, I was going through. I had just left a Fortune 500 company. I was burned out. Sick of the corporate culture, sick of staring at the four walls of a cubicle. So I was really like yourself. I wanted to see other parts of the world. And as it turned out, a friend invited me to Russia. And at the time, I had never left. Unfortunately, believe it or not, at the age of 30, I had never left the United States, which I guess isn't so terribly. I guess you get a lot of Americans who do that. We don't even have passports. So it was a real adventure. So when I first stepped foot in Moscow some 25 years ago, it was just a mind-blowing experience. And I had no idea what to expect. And at the time, 25 years ago, in Russia, the place was being ruled by Yeltsin at the time. And to be honest, it was a mess. The city was just, but through all of that, you still felt the Russian spirit, as they say, the Russian soul. the famous Russian soul. And I had gotten a visa for just 3 months, and I just intended to stay here, just see a little bit, say that I did that, and then return home. But then I started teaching English. My first month, I got more interested in the culture, started learning more about it, meeting people. My students, I got to learn more about the Russia, and it just became, to me, very fascinating. And I realized quite quickly that the Russia that I had been sold through the media was not the Russia that I had been anticipating. The Russian people, as you know, they're extremely intelligent. They're inquisitive. They had no problems. I've had actually almost no problems at all when people find out that I'm an American. Especially back then, it was such a big deal. You know, they were just, swarmed me with questions and wanted to know everything. And that was fascinating. The whole cultural aspect of that was very interesting. And I've got to witness the changes through the years. And now Moscow, it's literally unrecognizable from what it was 25 years ago. I don't know if these are the types of things your listeners are interested in, but the physical changes to the city. If anybody had been here, for example, during the football championship just a couple years ago, they know that, and it was held in, I think, 11 different cities throughout Russia, and I think that just presented a fantastic opportunity for Russia to open its doors and let people see for themselves exactly what this place is all about. Because it's, like I said, as many people already now know, it's not the place that's being sold in the media. It's a fantastic. I mean, Moscow, it's just world class now. It's, although I kind of do miss the original Russia that I landed in. There are some things about that that's, that were very unique at the time that, well, those days are over, but they've moved on, and it's very modern now. They still have a way to go, but right now everything's really improving here. So,
and so you've been there for 25 years. You're an American like myself, and then how do you view then America, the America that you left behind, and America as it is today, and this idea of American empire?
To be honest, I don't really think so much about American empire, like in terms of military. I guess I should, being in Russia and seeing the way that, for example, NATO is creeping up, and not even just creeping up. I mean, they are smack on the border now of Russia. So those things are very disturbing to see that, to see how that's happening. They just slapped sanctions again against Russia and I guess Turkey at the same time. So you see things like that happening. That's disturbing. But I think the aspect of American empire that I think bothers me the most right now, because I don't think that we're ever going to actually, at least no time soon, unless some kind of crazy accident is going to happen, I don't think there's actually going to be a war anytime soon. So I'm not particularly worried about that, although it is, of course, concerning. But what really bothers me right now is the cultural aspect of the so-called American empire and how that's creeping up on the entire world. And there are things that I've noticed. Well, it's impossible not to notice, that have happened in the United States 25 years ago. Like, for example, the transgender movement. Okay, I'm just picking out one thing off the top of my head here. Things like this, and I have children here, and I think I would be really concerned about sending my children to a public school in the United States, because here, they're teaching kids in the elementary grade level, topics on sex that I personally don't think is appropriate. Many other conservative-minded people like myself don't want their children knowing about. So that's just one of many things. This whole cultural, and now you have the social justice warriors and the atmosphere, the climate on college campuses, where you're not really allowed anymore to speak about certain things. And now there's so many things that are happening. It's almost impossible to put them all together in one thought. But what else do you have? Critical race theory Trump just found out that in his own government, for example, they were teaching in various government departments, they were teaching this critical race theory, which was basically telling their employees, their federal employees, that white people, how did they phrase it, are basically racists, and they contribute to racism. They just came right out and said the word white people. And I find these types of trends very disturbing. And the fact that corporate America has jumped on this social justice warrior bandwagon with their different commercials and pushing this whole idea. I don't see these things happening from the grassroots level. I see them being forced upon the people from up above. And so for me, that's one segment of the American empire that I find extremely disturbing.
Yeah, I would agree with you as well. I wouldn't want to send my kids to school, public school in the U.S. and you can really contrast this. I've been to Russia as well, and for a couple of weeks, and really been with Russian people, and I've lived in Kazakhstan, and the media portrays these things that you're discussing, transgender, social justice. It's a kind of it's a Marxism. One element is this Marxism, or cultural Marxism. And a lot of the people, even these former Marxist countries, they don't go along with it. They paint it as a majority movement, but it's actually quite only a minority that's into this. And if you go to like Kazakhstan, the vast majority of the population, 95%, wouldn't go with this thing. And I would assume similar in Russia and other countries. And then speaking of, that was one of my questions. You've written articles about this. You quoted recently the great comedian George Carlin and his prediction that, quote, when fascism comes to America, it will not be in brown and black shirts. It will not be with jackboots. It will be Nike sneakers and smiley shirts, end quote. And, I think we've arrived. You have this, you mentioned this totalitarian cancel culture, social justice movement embodied by Black Lives Matter and Antifa. And as you said, we have plenty of evidence to show that these movements are funded by these oligarchs, Soros and the big corporations, and they've teamed up with Nike and the big corporations. And if you don't pledge allegiance to them, you're physically assaulted. They're going to people's homes and telling them they're going to kick people out of their homes, and you get terminated from your job. That's another reason I left the U.S. I've been reading about conservatives in education who are getting fired from their jobs just because they don't accept these ideologies. So they're preaching tolerance, yet they're being intolerant. But that's why I go to countries like Kazakhstan, or for now Mexico, or even Russia, where you can still work normally, having your own beliefs and not having this forced upon you. So if you want to talk more about, do you see this coming to Russia anytime soon? Because in Kazakhstan, I've seen it seep in with the youth, through their consumption of internet, social media and blogs, and a lot of American culture.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's something that I do think about quite often. I'm so thankful that I did find a place like Russia that does share my personal outlook on these subjects, and so now I feel like I kind of owe it to places like Russia to speak out against it, and to try to fight against this movement, because you do have things like social media now, the internet. There are no more borders, so to speak, of that can block these ideas. And just because today Russia is a very conservative place, who knows what the political atmosphere here, the climate will be like tomorrow. It could change very quickly. I hope to God it doesn't. And, places like in Kazakhstan as well that uphold this. And just to give you an example, you probably know that back in I believe it was 2014, Putin had passed this so-called this is what they call it in the United States, the anti-gay law. Okay. And really what that was, it was just a law, a very lengthy named law that was just designed to protect children from sexual sexual themes that should not be directed at minors. Okay, they're just basically trying to protect children from these messages. That's all. And when I think about it, it was such a simple thing. This law, it was presented in the Duma, and in a matter of days, if not hours, it was passed. There was the overwhelming majority of Russians, I think 97%, agreed with it. No problem getting it through. And I just thought to myself, it would be so nice if we had a political system in the United States where something like this could just, to me, it's such a logical thing. It's such a logical thing. Kids don't need to be thinking about these types of subjects. They don't need to have these ideas projected to them. If you look at this transgender movement, I hate to beat on this all the time. I tend to talk too much about it, but to me, it's a bit disturbing. I think that it's just being really pushed on people, and of course, there are some people who do have these feelings and beliefs, but I think it's a real minuscule part of the population. And you have now you have a lot of kids. They've gone through this whole sex change. They've gone through the hormones. They've had operations, and at a very young age. And now they actually realize that they made a mistake. And once you go that far into it, there's really no turning back. And so you see things like that happening, and it's really, to me, it's really regrettable. So I think that. But to answer your question, do I see these things coming here? Yeah, you go into the bookshops, for example. I see particular books that, I really don't have any other word to explain them except they're just satanic. And that's a very strong term, and I mean it quite literally. You look through some of them, and some of them are even published by the Disney company. Okay, and I don't think that Russians. I think Russians are, in some cases, they're accepting of very many things from the West, and they don't necessarily understand. Maybe not that they don't have the intelligence to understand it, but I don't think they quite understand some of the what they're trying to do, what outside forces might be trying to do here. And I think that's probably the way that these people feel that they can get their foot in the door here, is through the children first. I see it in the cartoons. I have to be really careful what I let my children watch here, which is really unfortunate. When I'm letting them watch television in the morning, for example, I have to try to find the one channel that still plays Soviet cartoons, because I know that in the Soviet period, of course they didn't do everything right, but they knew how to make cartoons. Very simple, innocent type of entertainment for kids. You can't get that nowadays. You turn on, you look at the cartoons now, and they're just, everything is so fast, and the messages are terrible, and everything is violence. So yeah, through different ways and means, I do see them trying to get their message here, and to me it's disturbing. Yeah.
All right, that's an interesting point you brought up, because we haven't really talked about that on Geopolitics and Empire. There's the economic aspect of the empire, which we often talk about. That controls the whole Bretton Woods system, which is kind of falling apart now, I guess. And then the military aspect, but there's definitely this cultural aspect. And as I mentioned in the beginning, that's one of the reasons I left the U.S., because I had wanted to talk with all my friends and people around me, talk about all of these higher intellectual things, and all people wanted to do was just get drunk and talk about sports and cars, and that's one of the and not everyone is like that in America, right? But it's a common thing. The weekend you just go to the bar, get drunk, talk about sports, and I'm like, I had enough about this. I want to go do some soul searching. So I went out into the Gobi Desert, right? And then to get your thoughts then on also what you've been writing about. What's happening now, this contested election, right? Often with empires, they rise and fall, and then as they begin to decline, a lot of things start to fall apart. The political stability, the culture tends to degenerate, as you've been describing, and then there's a terminal economic decline. So now we have this contested election. From my perspective, I haven't voted for a long time, but I believe it's clear that Trump won re-election, and that we just experienced a coup and color revolution. That was something a few months ago. Dr. Paul Craig Roberts spoke to me about on this channel. And, we're on the verge of, I think, possible great civil unrest, even some kind of civil war scenario. There's this interesting Russian professor, Igor Panarin, who a decade ago put out a map projecting how the U.S. would, break apart into different pieces. But, also America's a lot like a Hollywood film. You can really expect anything to happen by inauguration day, January 20th, and afterwards. So, what's your take on the current situation with Trump, the election, civil unrest, civil war?
Wow. Yeah, I agree with you that it's a very precarious time for the United States. I think a lot of people, I'm on Twitter right now, and a lot of the people who I follow, they're Trump supporters, and you can just sense this desperation and this anticipation for anything to happen. I mean, these people, they've been led along to believe all this time that there were going to be arrests. You have this whole Q movement, for example, and whether or not that's legitimate, I still don't know, but it's very interesting. But these people have been led to believe that, yes, Trump is, first of all, he's going to drain the swamp. He's going to make arrests. Now you have this situation where it's clearly wide-scale fraud and corruption in the election. It's really unbelievable what they got away with. This whole Dominion voting systems that they have in place. I mean, in Michigan, the percentage of errors were like 60 to 70%. It's really unbelievable. So, and Trump is not, his whole reason for getting into politics to begin with was to basically save America. I mean, I know that sounds a little bit probably over the top, but really, he didn't even really want to get into politics at the beginning. And now he sees that he's been really cheated out of office by probably one of the most corrupt individuals that has ever. I mean, if Biden actually becomes president, that's just going to be unbelievable. And to believe that this guy couldn't fill a Waffle House on a Sunday morning, and to believe that this guy got more votes than any other presidential candidate in American history is just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of in my life. And if it wasn't for COVID, I don't know how they would explain the empty seats at all of his rallies, because nobody's interested in the guy at all, really. So you look at things like that, and it's just so obvious to so many people. And so that's number one. Number two is how are they gonna move forward? How is the country going to move forward? How are Republicans? Right now the Republican Party is basically Trump supporters. So if all these people just feel like they wasted their vote, they wasted 4 years, Trump didn't get into office, like he didn't get reelected like he should have. He didn't get a chance to finish what he had promised he would finish. Didn't get to put up the wall. All these other things, so many things, and no arrests were made that so many people were anticipating. I just think that's going to make so many people really give up hope. So if Biden actually if he is actually inaugurated on January 20th, I think that is going to be I can't even imagine it happen. I can't imagine this guy in the Oval Office, to be quite honest. Kamala Harris as well. I think they're both very inadequate, to put it mildly. So will it lead to civil war? I think right now, absolutely anything is possible. I was actually just on Twitter before I got onto this interview with you, and I was listening to or reading about some thoughts from some people who they actually think that Biden will be arrested on inauguration. I mean, there's so much hope in these people, and they just cannot give up hope in Trump. So that's a real powder keg, and it could really blow. I could see it happening. You got the Proud Boys, you've got Antifa, you've got BLM. So all the chess pieces are there, and it's just going to take something to set it off. And I think the Biden inauguration could just very well be it. Although who knows what's going to happen on January 6th? I'm still trying to figure out exactly how the Electoral College, this whole thing works with the states sending their legislators to Congress. What power do they have? Whether or not they can vote. I'm still trying to figure this out. I'm reading on it right now. I'm trying to write an article about it. And it's funny that as an American, I really don't even quite understand. I'm hearing different sides to the story, how they're able to do this. I know that the Congress, if there are enough senators and members of the House of Representatives to object to the votes, to the Electoral College votes, then they could, basically hand it to Trump. Whether or not the state legislators, who actually should have more power than, for example, the governors of the states, because they're the real representatives of the people, whether or not they can actually change the vote to Trump is something that I'm trying to figure out. Maybe you can shed some light on that if you know. But things like this, it's coming down to the wire, and you also have, for example, Sidney Powell. Although she's not necessarily affiliated with the Trump legal team, she's got a lot of things. The other lawyer, Lynn Wood, what he's saying on Twitter is unbelievable. So he's threatening to put for example, Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, threatening to put him into jail. It's getting, and this is the thing. This is the dangerous aspect of it. The media is not talking about any of this. There's just so much tension and frustration and anger on the right, and a lot of it is due simply to the fact that the media just does not cover it. They will not talk about it. If it wasn't for a very few up and coming like Newsmax, NTD, these up and coming channels, you won't even know about it. And most people don't follow them, of course. So a lot of people on the right are just getting so frustrated with this, just a complete blackout of information about it, and that's leading to the frustration. On the other hand, if by some chance Trump does, if his legal team or if the Congress somehow decides that it was fraudulent and they give the electoral points to Trump, he has a chance to get 274 if the swing states are nullified, as I think they should be. You have a situation there where people are not going to be expecting that. I mean, right now, the Democrats, they firmly believe that Biden is in. There's no problem. It's all smooth sailing all the way until Inauguration Day. But that's not the case. A lot could happen before then. There are still people who have strong reservations about Biden, about the voting, how that took place. So anything could happen right now.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And like I said earlier, that this is like a Hollywood film. Like you absolutely don't know what's going to happen. And there are things that legal actions, legal, rabbits, they're talking about pulling out of hats that go back, to the 19th century that could be done, but that would, or some things that would be historic, but legal to do. And as you say, I don't see whatever happens. I mean, you laid it out perfectly well. It's a powder keg, either from the left or from the right. If Trump is reelected somehow, the left's going to explode. If Biden goes in, the right's going to explode. I don't see this, Biden coming into power and just things normally moving on as we would in an election cycle. So something's, going to happen. As you said, we don't know exactly what. And on the Q thing, I never was really a believer in the Q movement. I kind of viewed it as a psychological operation, and because you look at the effect that it had was basically to take people who would otherwise do things, translate their actions into the real world, to kind of just have them sit on their couch and not do anything and think everything would be taken care of. You kind of like pacified people. And someone pointed out, interestingly, when the Bolshevik revolution happened in Russia, they ran a counterintelligence operation kind of similar to Q to get people to stand down who otherwise would stand up, and then figure out who are the people, kind of like a honeypot type of thing. So
yeah.
I never was really, and then when they used Q, the establishment used Q as a pretext to ban a bunch of channels. So again, that's telling that they painted people as Q, and then we deleted all these channels because they were talking about hue. So that was not a good sign. And then to look at COVID, because a lot of these things converge. I've covered COVID-19 quite a lot on this channel, but suffice it to say that it has officially or overtly introduced unveiled fascism, I think, in the U.S., because we have now private corporations working together with the government to control our lives. Silicon Valley, big tech, big box stores like Amazon, Walmart, Costco, and so on. They're dictating things. They're shutting down all of the other small businesses, independent businesses, and taking over the market. Things are going so far as to limit our free speech, our freedom of religion. Churches are shutting down, freedom of movement. Right now, they're talking about these. They close us down, and they talk about these freedom passes, right? You can't leave your house. But we have, it's like freedom fries, right? From the Bush's war, and now we have a freedom pass. And then you wrote a piece. You wrote a piece, quote, titled, quote, "When COVID-19 Meets Cancel Culture." And you also wrote another piece called, quote, "COVID-19 has replaced Osama bin Laden as the fall guy for civil liberties," end quote. And, since March, I've been calling COVID-19 either COVID-19 84 or Corona bin Laden, because it's like this non-existent boogeyman, again, that's being used as a pretext to take total control over us. So, what's your take on the COVID situation?
Well, first of all, I don't really even believe that. It was funny. I saw a Facebook post today that COVID is a great killer. It's killed the flu. It's killed pneumonia. It's killed common sense. So it really, from having to just wear a mask going into stores, I'm really not good about that. When a cashier refuses to wait on me until I put my mask on, I'm really not good with that sort of a thing. So I have to say something, and a friend of mine said, "Oh, well, you shouldn't give them a hard time. They're just doing their job." And I said, well, you know what? The Nazis also said the same thing. The people who supported the Nazi regime, they were also just doing their jobs. I hate to make that comparison, but that's where I fear that's where this could be heading in very quick order. You get these people who before had no powerless jobs. I mean, I don't mean to degrade them or demean them, but store cashiers now, they can, and they're forced to wear their mask all day long. I feel so bad for these people, big, heavy black masks over their nose and mouth. I can't wear mine over my mouth for more than 5 minutes without feeling that I'm being suffocated. So I don't know how they do it all day. So they're probably feeling a bit anger, and they want to exert some control on other people's lives. So you have that aspect of it. But I'm kind of grateful that I don't know how things are going to get here in Moscow. We did have a lockdown for a while. Everything was shut down, restaurants and everything back in, when everybody else was shut down. But now everything is open again. So I find myself, which is kind of ironic, I find myself being happy that I only have to wear a mask. The other day I went shopping in Moscow, buying socks or something, and I had to put a mask on, had to put gloves on to pay the cashier. And I had a little argument with her. I feel bad after I do that because, like I said, it's not their fault. But I just feel that everybody needs to say something at some level so that the frustration somehow gets up to the top, and they start to understand that they're pushing people too far. So yeah, and it's really a new sort of fascism that's been pushed on the world. I sometimes I like to think, or I do think that this whole thing was started. I mean, if you look back, for example, at Event 201, okay, this is just the most amazing thing, and I wrote a piece about that back a few months ago, and it's just incredible. I mean, they predicted every single thing that happened just a few months later. A pandemic was going to come. Businesses were going to be shut down, and they had all these different CEOs of, for example, Lufthansa was there, and they were giving their predictions how the airlines were going to have to shut down, how restaurants were going to have to close down. I mean, and they had a fake news organization also speaking there, GNN instead of CNN, giving their drama and take on the whole thing. And it's when I read that, when I really read the details of Event 201, that's when something clicked in my mind, and I said, "Wow, this is really, there's something here. There's no way this could have just." And actually, the Johns Hopkins University, they're the ones who sponsored this Event 201, and they had actually come out and say that no, we were not actually predicting this would happen. It was just a fluke. So they had to actually come, because there's so many people who were asking questions about it. And then you had military games as well that were taking place in actually in China at the time. There were sporting matches, I believe, and there's a lot of talk about that the athletes who were participating weren't very good athletes. They might have been doing something they should not have been doing while they were over there. I mean, who knows? So many unbelievable things happening. So there's I guess the conspiracy theorist inside of me once tells me that this whole thing was, of course they were going to do it anyways. I mean, this whole thing about a pandemic, Bill Gates has been talking about it forever. He's been pushing his vaccine on the world forever. He wants his tracking technology and everybody. So I would be far more inclined to take the Russian Sputnik vaccine if I actually had to make a choice. I won't do it unless I have unless I'm actually forced to. But it looks like the way, like you were talking about the freedom passes and everything, freedom prize. That's what it looks like it's coming down to. Bill Gates, he's coming out and saying that there isn't going to be, people aren't going to be able to participate in sporting events, entertainment events, unless everybody has this vaccine. You won't be able to board an airplane, I suppose, soon. So everything that democracy, our modern democracy, has been built upon, which is the ability to, participate in these sort of things. At least that's a big part of it, to consume things, to be entertained, to attend a sporting event. I mean, now they have cardboard cutouts in place of actual live people in the stands of these. It's so surreal. It's so creepy. It's so, I don't even have words for it, to be honest. It frustrates me so bad. And I'm sure it does a lot of other people. And now they're talking about this vaccine that even though people get the vaccine, they're still going to have to wear their masks. They're still going to have to social distance. So I don't know. It's just crazy. There's no other word for it. It's just absolutely crazy. And I don't know where we're going to be in a year from now, but they're really laying the groundwork. And they really found the perfect mechanism to ram through their idea. I mean, you have a bug that you can't even see. It terrifies people. They hear stories. I mean, personally, myself, you when you look at the statistics, it's like, 99.85% chance of dying if you actually get this thing. Kids are almost completely immune to it. Many people are asymptomatic. They don't even know they've got it. So, when you hear all these things and the reaction to it is just so over the top, just to kill the economy. That in itself, it's far worse than the disease. It's like trying to shoot a fly with a cannon. It's just incredible. You're killing the economy. You're driving people into depression, suicide, alcoholism, domestic abuse. And I know myself, for example, I'm just one of millions of people, but my office has become my kitchen table, really. That's where I'm writing my articles from. I wanted to convert my balcony into a little office, but I didn't get to do that this year. But, millions of people like me and you, I suppose, we're like, this is just so, we're thrown into something that we've never had to deal with before. And it's not like we're dealing with the Black Plague here. This is something that's actually quite minor in the grand scale of things, but they just keep throwing it at us. They keep talking about the cases going up. Cases. Okay, wonderful. But what about the death rate? They don't want to tell us about that. And it's pretty much flat. There's not that, unless you're talking about some of the nursing homes where guys like Andrew Cuomo and Whitmer and Gavin Newsom from California, they threw all these old people into nursing homes knowing that they had COVID. So what does that do? Of course, it drove up, I think, 40% of the deaths in the United States come from old people who were in nursing homes, who were put there, or who were infected by people who were put there, who had COVID. It's insane. And these people, that's one thing. I was waiting for there to be some sort of legal action taken against these four governors of these four democratically run states. And it's always the democratically run states. I don't know why. but you get these extremely draconian measures that always tend to happen in California, Michigan, New York, Pennsylvania, all democratically run places. So there's a political aspect to it, that's for sure.
Yeah, this is something I think unprecedented in history, but something interesting, as we've seen with a lot of past revolutions, Jacobin, left, Bolshevik, whatever revolutions, public health often was used as a pretext to carry out, a regime change, and this seems to be a regime change on a global scale, because it's incredible. From pretty much all nations of the world, either the presidents, prime ministers, governors, mayors are following the same script. And I think a lot of these things are interlinked that we've been discussing. This cancel culture that's being propagated as like the cultural aspect to the rest of the world. And then you have the economic part where the monopolies are taking over, and it's happening globally. I've been reading in Kazakhstan, a Kazakh minister came out and said if there's like a second lockdown in Kazakhstan, the middle class in Kazakhstan will be permanently wiped out. And I know here in Mexico, I've been reading, 1 million businesses have gone out of business. Like that's 3 million jobs. 150,000 of these corner stores in Mexico gone. Poof. And so it's happening globally. And then another aspect is the censorship. I wanted to get your take as a writer and a journalist, how you see the media landscape, which is it's insane. It's global. It's completely Orwellian, dystopian, total censorship. Anything that's not politically correct, not pro-establishment, that's not liberal, anything that's not pro-big pharma, pro-war gets deleted. One of the publications that you write for, which I like very much, I don't always agree, but I read different things and I like strategic culture. It's completely banned from sites like Twitter. There's degrees in censorship. So there are sites where you can post a link on Twitter, and then if someone clicks the link, it will tell you, oh, are you sure you want to go there? It's a suspicious website, right? It's like a one level of censorship. You can't even post strategic culture to Twitter or Facebook, which is incredible. So what's your take on the censorship that's going on?
Well, it's horrible. It's just not where I thought our country would ever go. Now, before, just a few years ago, whenever I was doing, for example, a Google search, I felt comfortable knowing that I would get a multitude of different, what do you call it? I lost my train of thought there.
I guess,
results,
articles, right? Results.
Yeah, just results. You get many different types of results. Now it's just all streamlined to one sort of. For example, you look up Trump, you type in it, and you just guaranteed to get nothing but anti-Trump things. If you look up COVID, you punch in the words risks of the vaccine, you're going to get all the good stuff about the vaccine. It's just things like that. Google, and then they say, well, go to other search engines like DuckDuckGo or something like that, and they're just pretty much, I don't know how other people feel about it, but useless, I think. So Google has really got a death grip on information, and it's scary to me. And I'll tell you one thing that I really think what they're trying to do is just basically extinguish history. You can't get paperback Britannica encyclopedias anymore. Everything is online. Everything is electronic. So our whole history is in the hands of these big tech mega companies. And you talk about the memory hole. I mean, they've got that control right there. And I hope this doesn't sound racist, but if your listeners want to conduct a little experiment, go onto Google and type in white American inventors. This is a subject that's been touched upon by, and I read about this on the UN's site. And you're not going to get a single in the top 10. You might get one or two white American inventors, and you're going to get, and like I said, I'm not racist, and I understand, but you're going to get all Black American inventors, people you've never heard of before. Now, this is just one example. And when I saw that, I was just so amazed, thinking to myself, my God, I mean, this is the one thing that Americans pride themselves on, white Americans pride themselves on probably the most, is their contributions to technology, engineering, things like that. And when I saw that, I thought, okay, there's something really strange about this. This talk about totalitarian, and I was very disturbed by that. You didn't get the Wright brothers up there, Thomas Edison, even Bill Gates. And it might sound a little bit ridiculous, but that's the first step, I think. And now you've got all this talk about critical race theory, and I'm just giving one example of how this so-called censorship could work in a different way, not necessarily directly related to media, but overall. And then you get the media landscape as well, which is President Trump. He can't tweet something. The president of the United States cannot tweet something without getting some kind of comment from Jack Dorsey that it's not legitimate, or it's been debated, or how dare you say that mail-in ballots could be somehow fraudulent when it's been proven over and over again that they're very prone to being manipulated. So things like that. I mean, if even the president of the United States can't put out a message without getting some sort of tag on it from these social media monsters, then I don't know. We're all in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I remember the early days of the internet in the 1990s and the 2000s, and it was a complete Wild West, and it was beautiful. You could type into the search and you get everything, all perspectives, crazy perspectives, good perspectives, and then you figure it out, right? Which is how it should be. And
right.
As you said, I've noticed this recently, and it's really sad. As you said, Google, even because a lot of the other search engines backends on Google, like DuckDuckGo or whatever, and they're giving you pretty much the same things. And it's like, now to get back to that old Wild West, you got to go to the alternative social media channels, like using Telegram or these Gab or Minds or independent channels, these BitChutes, all these things that are sprouting up as alternatives. That's where that Wild West internet has gone. But it seems slowly, they're tightening the screws, and that's what Eric Schmidt, the former head of Google, had said some years ago, that Google's purpose in the future was you type in one search topic and you're going to get one result, that Google's going to tell you that this is the truth about this topic. You will no longer get, 2 or 3 perspectives where you figure it out.
That.
Yeah. And it's scary, and it's a struggle for like people like us to be doing what we're doing, because tomorrow everything can just be gone.
Yeah, there were so many YouTube channels. Like whenever there was, for example, a shooting, like that Las Vegas shooting, for example, or 911 or whatever, you could get onto YouTube, and there were so many wonderful citizen journalists out there. And I really, and like you're saying too, everybody, we're all intelligent. We can all weigh the information ourselves. We know what might be false. We could do our own research, but they don't want that. They don't want anybody challenging their narrative. For them, that's a very dangerous thing. They want to have the corporate mainstream media narrative, and nobody else should have a right to be able to counter that. And if you try to, then you're a conspiracy theorist, you're nuts, you're whatever. And that is really disturbing. And they've got, so I don't know what the answer to that is. I really don't know how they're going to fix that. Google, they've got control of it. And I see what you're saying with BitChute and Gab and Telegram and all these others. And, that's good to see that they are cropping up. Myself, I'm concerned about that as well, because next time you have some sort of, for example, a mass shooting, and you had people on BitChute, for example, who were promoting some idea that, then they're going to have some kind of other excuse to crack down on these sites as well. So they're always going to find, I think, some kind of a reason, or they're going to be bought out, perhaps. I hate to be too cynical about it, too pessimistic. I mean, thank God that there are other sites like that. And now you see, like I mentioned before, Newsmax and these other news companies that are starting to crop up as well out of just pure necessity. People and it's such a breath of fresh air to hear these different viewpoints. And you go on to CNN and all these others, as you know, and it's just all cookie cutter views. You can't get any sort of and that's dangerous. That's really it's just a very dangerous thing when it's all uniformed like that and people can't get any sort of alternative info. I talked to my friends back in the States, and because a lot of them are just the CNN type, and I just can't even. I really can't talk to some of them now. It's just you can't. It feels like you're talking to a person from a different planet, and in reality, you are.
No, that's true. I feel the same way, and. I just wanted to touch also maybe comment on the racist thing. You mentioned sites like UNS, which I read, and I interview Marxists, I interview people on the right, and listeners to this channel enjoy the fact that I interview people from all perspectives. And we're not racist. We're painted with all these, I'm painted. The website is pro-Russian. Some people have said we're extreme left, Marxist, because we talk to these different people. And, I became a Mexican. Hey, and by the way, I'm a Slav. So some people say that the word Slav came from slave because we were slaves back in the day, Slavs. And, my grandfather was a Nazi prisoner who survived being a Nazi prisoner. So, the Nazis even wanted to take us out. So, how can I be a Nazi if I'm against that ideology? And my grandfather was a Nazi prisoner because he stood up for what was right. So we've kind of covered a lot, the waterfront. I'll call it the 3 C's, right? Cancel culture, COVID, and censorship. So do you have any final thoughts then to leave us with, or any other topic that's interesting for you?
If you haven't visited Russia yet, try to do that. Don't take the media's. I don't want to sound like a tour agent here, but I think it's really, really vital. And I think a lot of people are probably already aware of that. They probably have already heard stories about Russia from people who have actually been here. But Moscow and St. Petersburg, I think, and I actually used to meet a lot of. I had my former job moonlighted as a guide many years ago for Americans who came over here. Actually, when they were adopting children, I was kind of participating in that. American adoptions from Russia, though they've been banned. But I was moonlighting as that, and I was helping American. And every single American who I met over here, they were just, and this was, before all the really big changes started to happen. They started to really pump a lot of money into the cities and renovating them. And I mean, Moscow now, I think every square inch of the city has been somehow fixed up. It's amazing what they've done. I can't get into all the details now, but I just think that on a pro-Russian ending here, that it's not necessarily pro-Russian. It's just because I love my country. I love the United States. I want to see both countries do well. But I think that's one of the ways to do it, is to not believe, and I'm sure your readers are smart enough to already know that, but not to believe what they hear in the media, what they read about in the press about Russia, what they see on television. I remember one time I was in Latvia, and I was watching a German television station in my hotel room, and they showed the caption at the bottom said Moscow, Russia, and they showed this woman who was carrying buckets of milk by a stick on both sides, pails of milk down this muddy road, and just thinking to myself, my gosh, this is what people think of Moscow and Russia. Even my parents, I tell them what it's like here, and they just can't believe it, because they've seen the reality for themselves on television. So why would the TV lie to them? So yeah, if you get a chance, whenever the lockdown is hopefully it will be someday when the lockdowns are over and people are able to fly again, book a flight to Russia. You won't be sorry.
Yeah, I've been to Russia. I would agree the same. It's not what you think. It's nice, and other countries as well. I've been to China. I personally dislike the Chinese, let's say, regime or political system, but there's the whole Chinese culture. The landscape is wonderful. The history, the people, and again, that will change your perspective, because a lot of people who just consume, let's say, media on China will think, oh, I hate China. It's like, okay, the political system maybe isn't great, but you have to like separate the different issues. I know I had a friend that he visited Iran, right? He's a biker. He drove from Europe to Iran, and it was shocking, his experience. Like he drives into Iran on his motorbike, and people are like following him down the street, inviting him for food and tea into their homes, and it's just like he had a wonderful experience. Again, you separate from that from the political system, and
right.
And so people just need to get out more. So finally, you have your section on strategic culture. You write for RT. You're on Twitter. Are there any other websites or projects we should know about?
I'm working on a second book that consumes a lot of my time. So whenever I'm not writing for those other publications, I'm writing. That's about it, to be honest. I'm just trying to survive this lockdown, and as everybody else is, and that's about it, to be honest.
All right. You recently gave a good interview to a little-known channel, which I'll include the link in the description. Regis Tremblay. I think he also lives in Russia, and a lot of people he's interviewed I've met personally, and I've also interviewed some of them. Again, I'll recommend to listeners Robert Bridges' writings. I'll include the links. So find him on the Censored Strategic Culture, RT, and Twitter. And thanks again for being on Geopolitics and Empire.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed this Geopolitics and Empire podcast and interview. I would like to remind you that our website is geopoliticsandempire.com, and you can sign up for our mailing list that goes out each weekend with the latest podcast and a long collection of important news headlines. It's good to sign up for the newsletter in case we experience censorship and deplatforming. You can help the Geopolitics and Empire podcast by subscribing to and interacting with all of our channels such as YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Gab, Minds, and Steemit. You can also help us by leaving a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform such as iTunes, Castbox, Stitcher, Spreaker, and so on. Finally, if you value our work and our mission and would like to see us continue interviewing experts from across the political spectrum, please consider leaving a one-time donation via PayPal or Bitcoin, or becoming a regular monthly supporter on our Patreon. All the links can be found on geopoliticsandempire.com. Thanks for listening.